The second reading is taken from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 28, verses 16 to 20, and is the last verses of Matthew, the commissioning of the disciples. Now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. And Jesus came and said to them, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you. And remember, I am with you always, to the end of the age."
Thank you, Graham, and thank you to Jane too for the earlier reading. Now, during this time of lockdown, we've been enjoying as a family watching past episodes of Line of Duty. I don't know if any of you enjoy that series too. Well, I say we've been watching as a family. Actually, at times it gets altogether too tense for me, and so I either leave Kate and Steve to it, or I kind of half watch over my book, a bit like this. This last week, we finished the last episode of the final series, and it was just brilliant. The culmination of how it was crafted as the authors brought together all the sort of loose ends of the characters' stories over the series, with, of course, some surprising twists and revelations also. And so now we're left eagerly waiting for the next series whenever it's recorded. I don't know when that will be, wanting to see how things will play out in the light of all that's just happened. And as Graham said, the Gospel reading today is the culmination of Matthew's Gospel. It's the final episode of 28 chapters, bringing that together with all its blocks of teaching and gradual revelation of who Jesus is. There have been many surprises along the way in Matthew's tale too. The surprising teaching and actions of Jesus, demonstrating a whole new way of being and living. The upside-down kingdom values whereby the first shall be last and the last first. Themes of justice and forgiveness that go above and beyond the requirement of the law, where we're called to love and pray for not only our friends, but also for our enemies. There's been the surprising revelation too of just who Jesus is, beginning with the announcement of his birth as Emmanuel, God with us. And so it seems really fitting that Matthew ends his gospel with Jesus' words, "I am with you always." And so the stage is set, ready to move on into the next era of human history in the light of all that has happened. And what I'm trying to say is that there's some kind of a big picture feel to this whole passage, as Jesus' human life on earth is brought to a point of resolution where he is revealed as the one to whom all authority in heaven on earth and on earth has been given. That's what the gospel has been building up to. But it doesn't stop there. The next words are, "Go, therefore." And so we see also that this passage is a classic example of calling, as found in so many places in the Bible. First of all, there's an encounter with God, in Jesus in this case. Then there's often a stage of doubt or questioning that's overcome, that leads into a final stage of a commission, a calling to engage in God's mission to the world. So let's just have a think for a moment about the commission that the disciples receive. It begins, "Go, therefore." And the word therefore is important. It refers back to the previous verse in which Jesus tells them he has all authority in heaven and on earth given to him. Therefore, because he has this authority, they can go, not in their own strength and authority, but in his. Authority is one of the recurring themes of Matthew's Gospel, with questions from the leaders about where Jesus' authority comes from, and a recognition from the crowd of followers that he teaches with an authority unlike other leaders. There's also the story of the healing of the centurion's servant, in which the centurion recognises Jesus' absolute authority over sickness and disease, in parallel with his own authority over his soldiers, leading him to say, "Don't come to my house, I'm not worthy of that. You don't need to come. Only say the word, and my servant will be healed." Wow, that's some authority. And it's in that authority that the disciples are told to go. And what do they go to do? Well, there are three things. To make disciples, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son and Holy Spirit, hence this reading on Trinity Sunday, and teaching them to obey everything that Jesus has commanded. And that means not just the main commandments of love God and love your neighbour and love one another, but everything that he has taught them, not only in his words, but in the very way he's lived his life. And so Jesus is commissioning them to go and begin a worldwide alternative community, living out his teaching and under his authority. My study Bible points out that there are parallel scenes of commissioning in Roman literature like Virgil's Aeneid, in which the gods commission Rome to worldwide domination under their authority. In some ways, the disciples are given a similar goal, but the means and the values will be completely different, reflecting the different authority that they are under. Rome relies on the force and violence of military power, maintaining a surface peace, but through fear. There is gross inequality, where the success of the powerful depends on slavery and oppression of the many. In contrast, the disciples are to establish a community of invitation through the power of loving action and life-giving words, modelling compassion, healing, justice and mercy, and leading to the deeper peace and wholeness that life under Jesus' authority brings, reflecting the equality and the love shared amongst the community of the Trinity. Of course, living in this way will bring them into conflict with the world of Roman power and values. But Jesus ends with words of reassurance. There's a final command to remember. And he doesn't say, now remember everything I've told you, but remember I am with you always. What greater reassurance can there be? I am with you always to the end of the age. And it's at this point that we find ourselves pulled into the story. Jesus' words are not just for the disciples in that particular time and place, but to future disciples across all time. We too are called to establish alternative communities of justice and grace. And this will at times bring us into conflict with competing values in the world. Many people recently have been talking about what we are learning from our experiences in the current unprecedented situation. Living through turbulent times naturally leads to some reassessment of values and can bring to light underlying priorities and just whose authority we respect. Whether we follow government rules or whether it's right at times to make exceptions has been an interesting debate in recent weeks. But I have to say, I think it's also been something of an unwelcome distraction from what should be the bigger issues that this situation is throwing up. We are hearing stories of inequality and injustice, with increasing numbers of people facing poverty across the world. Unsustainability of energy and food production is causing damage not only to the earth, but to human health and well-being. There is a worrying trend towards individualism and nationalism over and against the inclusive communities of justice and peace that are in line with God's kingdom. And these are worrying trends that should cause us to think about how we might be modelling the alternative community that God calls us to be. But it's not all bad news. This situation has also highlighted communities supporting one another as never before, and people getting to know their neighbours. There have been heartwarming stories of sacrificial giving and generosity towards the vulnerable and those in need. We've shown ourselves capable of remarkable change and adaptation. For one thing, I never thought I'd be doing online services like this. But much more than that, we've found ways to build hospitals quickly and to house the homeless. So rather than focusing on the negatives, is there a way in which we can harness these positive changes to bring about not a return to how things were, but to a better world for everyone? That's what Tear Fund, a Christian organisation passionate about ending poverty, are urging churches to think about. Are we prepared to follow Jesus' commission to establish an alternative community based on kingdom values? We're going to watch their video to help us think about that more.